on the 19th of October, the government of the tiny Caribbean island of Grenada fell in a Marxist coup. The State Department, fearing another Cuba, argued for an invasion and said that because American students on the island could be taken hostage, it must be done immediately.
When the final decision was made by the president, it was made in the Situation Room on a rainy Monday afternoon at about 6 o'clock in the White House. And everybody had their say around the table. The Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Secretary of State, others and those. The room got very quiet as they all looked at him, and I'm sure it was no longer than 30 seconds. But it seemed to me to be about 5 minutes of silence, because that's where the buck stops, as they say. And the president finally says, okay, let's go.
But Grenada was a member of the Commonwealth, and the Queen was its head of state. A worried British Foreign Office, hearing rumors, had asked the Americans whether it was true they were planning to invade. Just hours before the first troops went in, the Foreign Secretary gave the House of Commons the reply he'd received from Washington.
Can your Foreign Secretary assure us that there's no question of American military intervention on the island in this situation? It could only make the situation worse.
There is no question of that, of which I know, sir.
On the night of October 24th, 1983, we were given a lovely going-away party by Princess Alexandra at the Thatched House Lodge in Richmond Park. And one of the guests was Mrs. Thatcher. And after dinner, she got an urgent telephone call from number 10 and had to leave rather swiftly. But before she went out the door, she motioned for me to come over in the corner of the room and said to me, "We believe that your chaps are going into Grenada tonight or tomorrow morning." She was furious. I was not called on the carpet. Someone named Ronald Reagan was on the telephone, because Mrs. Thatcher and President Reagan are Ron and Margaret to each other, and I was privy to some of their personal correspondence, and they're very close, and that must have been a sort of a hot telephone call.
Get back, honey, get down! He crashed into it.
Oh, my God!
He crashed right there. What are they going to do now? They got a rocket launcher on that hill.
Mrs. Thatcher argued against it to the president. I think she put her case very forcefully. And she put it in her comments, I'm sure, made an impact on the president. But she would understand, as an elected head of government, better than anybody, that the final responsibility for the protection of that country's citizens rests with that person. And in that case was Ronald Reagan, not Mrs. Thatcher.
And this conversation, was it a debate or a discussion, or was it Mrs. Thatcher telling the president what she
As I said, I didn't participate in the conversation, but I'm told that the majority of the talking was done by Mrs. Thatcher.
Grenada, America invades against Britain's advice. Thatcher warned Reagan in midnight call. They've humiliated us, Healy tells Howe in Commons uproar.
The Foreign Secretary told us yesterday there was no reason to think that American military intervention was likely, and that he knew of no American intention to invade. Now, that is an extraordinary statement to come from a representative of government which prides itself on being America's most loyal ally.
I felt very strongly that Geoffrey Howe had been very badly let down. People felt he'd misled the House. He hadn't. What he had done was given them the best information available to him. It wasn't good enough, but that wasn't his fault.
Are you saying the Americans told you they weren't going to go in and then did?
I think the words that I would use is there was a lapse in the good relations between the allies.
Sounds pretty much the same thing to me.
But you're a cynic.
Grenada, we were told, was a friendly island paradise for tourism. Well, it wasn't. It was a Soviet-Cuban colony being readied as a major military bastion to export terror and undermine democracy. We got there just in time.
There was a bitter reaction in America to Mrs. Thatcher's failure to support the president. The Wall Street Journal wrote that Grenada, under a Marxist government, was a far worse place than the Falkland Islands under Argentina. Britain was a fair-weather ally.
That was one that was a bit puzzling for us in the United States. It was obvious that we moved very quickly on Grenada, that we did not consult with the British government as thoroughly as we should have, but time didn't permit, and also the secrecy of the mission didn't permit. But we were a bit puzzled that Mrs. Thatcher did not back the United States invasion a little more strongly.
We are, of course, always impressed with the views of the British government and Mrs. Thatcher, but that doesn't mean that we always have to agree with them.
We quickly wrote it off to her necessity to deal with her own internal politics, and we respected that because, after all, she wouldn't be our friend very long if she wasn't reelected.
You mean she didn't really mind, she just had to appear to mind for domestic reasons?
Well, that's what we presumed.
A week later, the British Prime Minister took the opportunity of a BBC World Service phone-in programme to dispel any doubts that she hadn't meant what she said.
I think as a general rule, we in the Western countries, the Western democracies, use our force to defend our way of life. We do not use it to walk into other people's countries, independent, sovereign territories. We try to extend our beliefs not by force, but by persuasion. You mentioned oppression, communism. Yes, I hate it. There are many, many peoples in countries in the world who would love to be free of it. That doesn't mean to say that we can just walk into them and say, now you're free.